They say everything is empty. No self, no soul, no ground beneath anything. And if that's true, why do I feel so deeply when someone suffers? Why do I instinctively reach to help someone I don't even know? Why does the sight of a stranger crying make my heart ache? If I am empty, if they are empty, what is this thing that moves me? This is not a small question. It cuts to the heart of the Dharma. Because if compassion is just a trick, just another illusion in the void, then why did the Buddha teach it? Why is karuna, compassion, one of the 4 immeasurables? Why would a man who taught there is no self spend his life helping others? The contradiction haunts many students. They read that all is sunyata, emptiness, that we are not who we think we are, that suffering is a dream. And then, in the same breath, they are told to be kind, to save all beings, to feel the suffering of others as their own. How can both be true? If I do not exist, who is being compassionate? If you do not exist, who am I helping? Is this entire dance of love, mercy, kindness just another illusion? Or is it something deeper? Something that can only arise in the space where the self dissolves? When I was younger on the path, I wanted clear answers. I wanted to know if compassion was real or just an ethical program running inside my illusion. I thought, maybe it's biological. Maybe it's evolution. Maybe it's just conditioning. But every time I sat in silence and let all of that thinking drop, compassion was still there, quiet, unprovoked, undeniable. It didn't feel like an idea or a moral rule. It felt like the very structure of the space beneath me, as if, when all else was stripped away, compassion was the floor I landed on. Not because I believed in it, not because I wanted to be good, but because it was what remained when I was gone. This is the mystery I want to explore with you. Not just, is compassion compatible with emptiness, but something deeper. Could it be that true compassion requires emptiness? That only when the illusion of separation drops can love become absolute? If so, then compassion isn't an illusion inside emptiness. It's the echo of truth within it. Most of us are kind in a way that still centers me. We're kind because we see ourselves as good people, because it aligns with our beliefs, because it earns us respect, because it helps us sleep at night. But this kind of compassion is a role. It's a costume worn by the ego to feel important. The Buddha didn't teach this kind of kindness. He didn't say, be good so others will praise you, or help others so you'll feel less guilty. He pointed to something deeper, a compassion that doesn't come from being someone, but from seeing there's no one to be. This breaks the mind, because the mind wants identity, wants a label. I am a kind person. But what if compassion doesn't belong to anyone? What if, when the illusion of I falls away, what rises is care without center, love without possession, helping without helper? Think of the wind passing through the trees. It doesn't say, I'm generous. It just moves where there is space. Or the sun, warming both the saint and the sinner without preference. Or the body, when it heals a cut without being told. This is compassion, not as a virtue, but as a function of emptiness. When I sat in long silence, when the I began to dissolve, I found myself caring more, not less, more attuned, more present, more willing to feel another's pain without needing it to be mine. I didn't have to call it compassion. It just flowed. It didn't arise from me. It arose through me. the ego tries to claim compassion. I am helping. I am a bodhisattva. I am on the path. But true compassion needs no claim. It doesn't require a doer. It just happens, like water flowing downhill. This kind of compassion is dangerous to the ego because it asks nothing in return, not even a sense of self. It's not sentimental. It's not proud. It's like a fire that burns without asking permission. This is the paradox. The less you think you are someone, the more you feel for everyone, because you see they are not other. They are just you without the illusion of you. There's a fear, especially among new students of the Dharma, that realizing emptiness will make them cold, detached, indifferent to the world. If nothing is real, they ask, why care? If the self is an illusion, why help the suffering? It's a valid fear, because we equate feeling with identity. We think, if there's no me, there should be no feelings either, just a blank space, a void. But that's a misunderstanding, because emptiness doesn't mean nothingness. It means interdependence. It means there is no separate, fixed self, but not that there is no life, no experience, no heart. Emptiness is not the absence of things. It's the absence of solidity, the absence of barriers, of walls, of permanent edges. And when those walls fall, you feel everything. When I sat deep in meditation, when thought dissolved and the story of me unraveled, I didn't become less sensitive. I became undefended, wide open, like a sky that doesn't resist the storm. And into that sky poured the full ache of the world. I felt the cries of a grieving mother in a country I'd never been to. I felt the hunger of a child I would never meet. Not as ideas, not as statistics, but as waves in the ocean of which I was not separate. This is not detachment. This is intimacy, not apathy, but awareness without filters. And in that raw presence, compassion arises, not out of duty, not out of ideology, but because there's nothing blocking it anymore. So no, emptiness doesn't make you indifferent. It breaks the dam that held back your love. The coldness comes from the ego, from the illusion of separation, from the stories that say, this is me, that is you, this is mine, that is not my problem. When those stories fall apart, you don't care less, you care more, because you finally see clearly. This is the truth the Buddha pointed to. Not nihilism, not void, but the emptiness that opens into boundless connection. The compassion that doesn't need belief to burn. Compassion doesn't need a self to function. In fact, the self often gets in the way. It wants to manage kindness, own it, turn it into a personal brand. I'm a healer. I'm an empath. I'm spiritual because I care. But the Buddha didn't teach compassion as a strategy. He taught it as a natural unfolding from insight. When you look deeply and see that there is no fixed identity, when you realize you are not who you thought you were, there is a quiet breaking, not a breakdown, a breakthrough. What breaks is the dam of self-centeredness, and through the cracks, something ancient flows, a warmth, a light, a fire that burns for others without claiming to. I've seen this in dying monks, their bodies thin as twigs, their voices barely audible, and yet, in their eyes, a light, a compassion so vast you could drown in it. They don't ask if you're worthy. They don't calculate your karma. They simply love, simply feel, not from a story, but from the place where all stories end. This is the selfless fire. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shine for fame. It just radiates, silently, naturally, unstoppably, like a candle lighting other candles. never diminished. In our culture, we talk about burnout, as if giving could drain us. But what drains us is ego-based compassion, helping because we think we should, because we want recognition, because we're trying to fix people so we don't have to feel their pain. True compassion doesn't burn out because there is no one doing it. It flows like a river from the mountain, fed by silence, fed by emptiness, fed by not needing anything back. You don't need to believe you are someone to be kind. You just need to stop protecting the illusion that you're separate. And then, like sunlight through a cracked wall, compassion spills in. Or maybe it spills out. There is no boundary left to tell the difference. There's a story, one told across Mahayana lands, of a being who reaches the edge of liberation and turns back. Not because they failed, not because they were afraid, but because they saw others still drowning. This is the bodhisattva, not a saint, not a savior, but someone who sees the illusion of self and stays anyway. It sounds like sacrifice, to hold off enlightenment to help others. But this is not a martyrdom. This is not some holy suffering. It is the most natural response to emptiness realized. When you see that self and other are not two, how could you float off while others sink? You are them. They are you. There is no line. The bodhisattva doesn't stay behind because they're selfless. They stay because there's no longer a separate self to elevate, no me to free, while you remain bound. Only waves in one ocean. The deeper secret, the bodhisattva is not choosing compassion. They're not saying, I should help others. They are simply moving with the current of reality. And that current is love. I used to think that love had to be personal, that to really care for someone, I had to know them, had to like them, had to feel something special. But love that depends on preference is just attachment dressed up. What opened in me when the eye fell away was impersonal compassion, not cold but vast. A love that sees no enemy, no outsider, no other. The bodhisattva isn't above us. They're what remains when the clinging self dissolves, and what's left is service, not duty, not performance, just movement towards suffering, like a hand reaching instinctively to a wound. Not asking, is this worth it? Just reaching. This is the compassion beyond effort, the kindness that isn't practiced, but remembered. Because it was always there beneath the noise of ego, we think compassion needs hope, that in order to keep caring, we need to believe we're making a difference, that suffering will lessen, that our efforts will matter. But that's still ego talking. It wants results. It wants proof. It wants to feel effective. But true compassion doesn't wait for a happy ending. It doesn't require change to be real. When I sat in silence, I began to see this clearly. There are people you'll help who will not thank you. There are causes you'll serve that will crumble. There are wounds you cannot heal. Still, the hand reaches out. Still, the heart opens. Still, love flows. Not because it will succeed, but because it cannot do otherwise. This is the fierce tenderness of the awakened heart. Not soft because it's sentimental. Soft because it's surrendered. Surrendered to this truth. None lasts. Nothing can be controlled. And still, we care. I've seen monks serve dying lepers knowing they won't be cured. I've seen nuns hold crying children who will be taken back to broken homes. They know the limits. They know the odds. And still, they show up. Still, they smile. Still, They love without needing success. Compassion without hope is not despair. It's freedom, because it no longer depends on fixing the world to keep its flame alive. It burns because it burns, like a star in the dark that doesn't ask if it's seen. In this kind of compassion, you stop counting victories. You stop needing feedback. You stop needing to know if you're making a difference. Because kindness is no longer a tactic. It is who you are when the illusion of separateness falls. This is the courage of the bodhisattva. Not that they believe they will win, but that they love regardless. That they walk into the fire not to end it, but to be warmth within it. People think awakening is peaceful, that once you realize emptiness, you float through life untouched, unbothered, above it all. But the truth, real compassion breaks you, not once, over and over. It tears open the heart you spent years armoring. It strips away illusions you called strength. It reveals pain you tried to bypass with positivity. Because now, you no longer have the buffer of separation. When I first glimpsed this, it felt like being skinned alive. Suddenly, the world's pain was my own. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Literally, viscerally, mine. And not because I was suffering, but because the wall between me and the world had collapsed. This is the paradox. The deeper you go into emptiness, the more you feel, not less. Because now, there's no resistance left. No story to hide behind. No narrative to say, that's not my pain. Compassion doesn't come from being nice. It comes from being annihilated by reality. From having your heart shattered by the suffering you once ignored. From having your delusions melt in the heat of real contact. And it's not always gentle. Sometimes compassion is a scream, a rage, a holy fury at injustice and ignorance. Not because you hate, but because you care. Because the illusion of comfort has died. People say, if you're enlightened, you should always be calm. But have they forgotten how the Buddha wept when he saw the world suffering? Have they forgotten the stories of awakened ones raging at hypocrisy, crying over loss, grieving with the grieving? Compassion isn't emotional numbness. It's emotional nakedness. It's choosing to feel the full weight of this moment and to stay, to not run, to not escape into emptiness as a shield, but to embody it as a gateway to a love so fierce it consumes every trace of the ego that once held back. Here's the final turn. Even compassion, this sacred flame we speak of, is empty, not fake, not meaningless, but without fixed form, without inherent essence. It arises in conditions. It flows through minds and hearts, and then it changes. This is not a tragedy. It is the very beauty of it. Because what is not fixed can be flexible. What is not solid can dance. Compassion is not a statue to worship. It's a movement to join, a wave that rises and falls without clinging to its own shape. I used to think if something wasn't permanent, it wasn't real. But in the Dharma, realness isn't about duration. It's about impact. It's about function. If a word spoken in love changes a life, does it matter that the sound vanished in a second? Compassion is not less sacred because it's impermanent. It's more sacred because it chooses to rise in a world that will never hold it forever. It is a flower that blooms knowing it will fall. And still, it blooms. When you see that compassion is empty, you stop using it to build identity. You stop saying, I am a good person. And instead, you just love. You just act. No self. No story. No reward. only response, only presence, only this moment's truth. This is the highest paradox, that emptiness does not cancel love. It frees it from distortion. It releases kindness from ego. It lets giving be clean. The Buddha didn't ask us to be perfect. He asks us to see clearly. And when we do, when we truly see that all is empty, we find something strange, something holy, a compassion that doesn't need a reason, doesn't need a return, doesn't even need to exist for long. It just is. And in that brief arising, it transforms everything. Thus ends the journey. But the question remains, if all is emptiness, and yet this kindness still arises, then maybe that is the truest miracle of all. Not that compassion is real despite emptiness, but that it is real because of it.